In the last video, I put together an Angular application that allowed the user to log in to a web service. The web service sent back a JWT, a JSON web token, and then the Angular application would send that JWT as part of the header for every subsequent request, and so we were validating that that was working. And so the application we had was looking like this. So there you can see it's not working in terms of retrieving the data, but if I go to the login and enter my credentials, so remember that was Jasper Kent and then PA$W0RD, and I click on the login, you see we get the "you're logged in until," took a slight moment, and then gave us back 3 hours from now because we'd given the JWT a 3-hour limit when we set that up in the ASP.NET web service that we looked at in earlier videos. And once we've done that, it's now going to send that token with every subsequent call, and so you can now see that that's working okay. But we're still missing a few things with this. One is we haven't got any means of logging out once we're logged in. Also, we didn't put any error handling for if we incorrectly logged in. And also, you may remember something I spotted after I'd done the last video. There was a slight mistake in the way that the TypeScript worked that you won't notice as yet, but we'll come on to that and I'll fix that little bug as we come on as well. But the first thing I wanted to do is actually do the error checking on the login. So if we go back to the login, well, we're already logged in. We said we didn't have a way of logging out. Actually, we can log out because if we bring up the DevTools, and there we can see that's the JWT which we're storing in session storage. And so if we delete that, that now has effectively logged us out. So all we really need to do in terms of log out is do that through the Angular app, not have to do it directly. But you can see now that we are logged out again, we're failing to retrieve the data. But the thing is, if I were to try an invalid login, so I just type in some garbage in here, and we click the button, we get the message "you are logged in until," and then it just doesn't do anything else. It has failed to log in, but it's not being very friendly. And if we bring up the DevTools again and go to the console, there you can see we've got the 401 where it was the invalid credentials. And although it says 401 OK, we've got this slightly strange return, but it's definitely giving us a 401. And so that's the unauthorized attempt to log in. So how are we going to report that error in a more friendly way? Well, we're going to go into VS Code, and if we bring up the login component, there we can see what we've got in there. So we've just got the login. It has this authentication service that returns an observable of date, and that gets picked up in the component itself, and we can see we're looking at that for things like "you're logged in until," and then it does the async pipe on that and formats the date time. So we want to put some error handling in there. So what I'm going to do is firstly just on here put another property called error message, and I'll just initialize that to blank, so we've got no error message to start with. And then I'm going to have to go into this login again. Let's just reset that error message to blank just in case it has changed. And then on the observable that we're getting back from the authentication service, we're going to have some pipeable operations. So we'll put a pipe in there and put a carriage return. And then what we're going to do is on here, we're going to say map. So we'll get the map operator. And then there we've got the R for response. And one of the problems you might have noticed there was when we did do that login, it just gave us that message "you are logged in until," and then blank, complete gibberish really. And that's because of the way I originally did this. If we look in the template up here, it says "you're logged in until," and then just waits for that data to arrive. We want the entire message to only appear once we've got the data. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say "rgives," and then we're going to convert that to a string. So we're going to say "you are logged in until," and then we'll just interpolate and we'll say R dot, and we know that the type of R is already a date because that's what it was an observable of. And so we'll just do on that to, and then let's just do locale time string. So that will just give us the time in the current format. So previously we were using the date pipe, but here we're going to use the JavaScript function. It should work in pretty much the same way. So once we've done that, that's the end of the map. That means, of course, that this is now going to be an observable of string because we're returning a string. So let's put that in there. And then let's actually put in the error checking. So we're going to say catch error, so another operator that goes in the pipe, and then gives, and then this dot error message. So the error message we set up there, and then we're going to just give it simply login failed, so no information other than it failed. And that actually needs to be in a code block, because we're also on the end of that, we've got to say return throw error. So this is what you typically do with one of these catch error operators, and then we can just say gives new error, and then we can use the full message. So this one is going to be rather more informative, but this is what's going to appear simply in the console, not what's going to appear on the screen. So there, that should have set that all up. So we can see what's happening. We slightly changed the way we're displaying that message. So we've got the whole message being returned rather than just the date. And then we have the catch of the error. So if we have an error returned, we'll just pop up the message, which is going in there, and then also we'll throw the exception. And then what that means is in the template, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to put in an element to display the error message. So I've predefined an error class just to show it in red. And so in there, we can just bind onto the error message. And then also here, we don't need to have the URL logged in until, and indeed we don't need to have the date pipe because we already did the date transformation. So instead, we're just going to have expiration async, still an observable, so it still needs to be done async. And so that's what we're going to put in there. And so now, if we save all that and go back to the browser, and now if I log in with some garbage, then we're getting the message login failed there. So as I said, we'll still get the verbose message if we go to the console. So that's what we did with the throw error. So we're still seeing the message there, but we've also got the data up here. We've still got a slight problem there. We've disabled all of those controls because we'd tried to log in, even though we didn't actually successfully log in. So let's make a slight change for that one as well. And so the way we'll do that is on here, I'm going to put in another property. So I'm going to say get logged in, and that's going to return a Boolean. And the thing about that is it's going to return, and then it's only going to be logged in if we have the expiration observable in existence, which means we've started the attempt to log in, but then also if we don't have an error message. And remember, because error message is a string, if it's blank, that counts as false, so that's what we want. That gives us a slight problem in terms of typing, because that's returning truthy or falsy, not true or false. So if we just do a double question mark false on there, that solves the typing issue. So we've got that logged in property, and then now what we can do is back in our template, rather than having the disabled based on simply whether we've got the expiration, we can put the logged in on there. And similarly on this one, we'll put the logged in. And that should mean it doesn't disable it if we fail. So let's save that. Back in here again. Again, let's do an invalid login. And it's login failed, but we can still now have another go and do a correct one. But we're hitting a problem. It's saying login failed again on that one, even though I assure you I typed in the correct password, PA$W0RD. Let's take a look at console, and now we can see something really weird. And this is actually that hidden bug that I accidentally introduced last time, and it's now rearing its ugly head in this particular problem. It's saying r.toLocaleTimeString is not a function. And the reason for that is, if we actually look at what's going on in here and go back to where that line is, so that was down here, it's saying it's not a function. And we can actually see what's happening there. Because if I put in a tap, and then let's just go r gives, and then let's do a console.log, and then put in type of r, and get hold of the tap imports. And then let's save that, go back here, let's try the correct login again, PA$W0RD, log into that, and there is the problem, that it's a type string. And this is a mistake I made because I'm sometimes programming in C# and sometimes programming in JavaScript and TypeScript. And the problem is I made the assumption that when we look at our login response, that the expiration is going to come back as a date. But actually, because it's been serialized to JSON to be sent off, in the TypeScript, it doesn't automatically deserialize it back to a date. It just has it as a string. And this shows also one of the slight limitations of TypeScript compared to something like C#, in that because we've said that's a date, that doesn't mean anything at runtime. That just gives us the correct compile time checking. So it all looked fine, but this thing that was coming through here, this R that we thought was a date, was actually a string. And it was working before because when I had it, we just take this back a bit, when I had that formatted using the date pipe will work equally well on actual date objects or on strings. And so, although I thought it was a date object, the date pipe handled it fine. But when I'm doing it in code now, that's where it's getting it wrong. So if I change that response type to string, that's now correctly what we're going to get back. And now we'll see we're now getting an error. It's got the failed compile there, and it's complaining that string is not assignable into a type date. So that's where it's getting all the errors for us. So we've got to work our way through those. So in the authentication service, we change that one to being an observable of string. And then in the login component, now we're getting the error correctly shown up there. And so what we need to do is format that in a slightly different way. I could convert the string into a date, but actually a neat trick we can do, we can still actually use the date pipe that I was using originally. So if I just say new date pipe, so you can use a pipe programmatically as well as doing it in the template, and you've got to put in the locale, so let's go for engb, which is where I am, and then on that date type we call the transform method, and we pass into that the thing we want to transform, which is our date as a string. That's fine, the transform, set that, and then also we've got to put the format, which remember was long time. So that, if we save it, should now be okay, and that should have fixed our hidden bug. So now if we log in with garbage, it gives us the error, but if we log in with a valid login, then it logs us in, and we don't get that delay where we saw you're logged in until first and then the time. It all comes in together, and that's all working fine. So what we've done in there, we caught any errors, and having caught errors, we discovered a hidden error we didn't know about and sorted that out as well. Next thing to do is we want to have a log out, and also we want to display some kind of friend information, just recognizing that we know who the user is. So let's add that next. So what we're going to do is add a new component, and so let's go in here and we're going to say ng g for generate component, and then I'm simply going to call this user. So this is going to represent the user once they're logged in. And then we'll go to that user component, and we're going to inject into that the authentication service, because obviously we're going to use that for the actual functionality. So we'll have a constructor in here that's going to take a public authentication service. So this is the service we wrote last time, called authentication service, and just store that. And then what we'll do with that is we'll also have a logout function that we're going to call from a button that we'll create, and that's going to return void. But that is going to, on the authentication service that we've injected, it's going to call logout, which we don't have. So let's go and fix that. So here's our authentication service, and it's got a login. We're going to give it a logout. And so all we need to do on that is what I did manually before. We need to remove the token from the session. So that's easy enough. We just say session storage, and then rather than get item, we've got remove item. And then we just need to pass in there the key, which remember we'd set up as a constant. So it's just JWT key, but that's what we have as the key. So now we've got the logout. So back in our user component, then we can just call that logout, and that will remove things for us. And then let's go to the template for this one. And simple enough, we could just put in, let's do this as an anchor. And we bind the click for this anchor onto the logout that I just wrote. So we'll call the logout. We'll just give it the label logout. And then that should really be all we need. Though we've then got to put that into the menu bar. So remember in our app component, that's where we had the menu. And at the moment, we've got the login as well as the all reviews and the summary. So let's delete that. And then in here, we'll just put an app user. And so that should put our logout button on that. And if we save all of that and then go back here, we can now see that we've got that logout button up there. So we're currently logged in because the token is still in session storage. But if I click on logout, doesn't do very much as yet. But if we now try to navigate to another one of those, then we can see that it's logged us out and we can't get the data anymore. Bit of a problem though, we've lost the login button, so we can't get back in there. So we've got to do just a little bit more on that. We've got to make this user component a little bit more friendly. So what we'll do is we will do something like this. We're going to go to the authentication service again, and I'm going to get it to actually be able to report back the username, because we'd like to display, if we're logged in, welcome whoever, and have the logout button, or if we're not logged in, we're just going to have the login button. So let's see what we can do with that. And so to get hold of the username, we're actually going to get it from the JWT token. So let's just get hold of the token again. I can do that through Swagger, because remember I can do the login here and just change that to Jasper Kent, PA$W0RD, and execute that. And there we get back our JWT. And remember we saw that we can analyze the JWT using the website jwt.io. So if we go in there and then just scroll down, and if I just paste in my token in there, remember it's got 3 sections divided by dots, which are base64 encoded, and then this is simply decoding those. So we see the basic header information, then we see the payload, and then we've got the signature that's encrypted. We can't see what's in there, but we can see the various claims that have been made. And the one we're interested in is the claim of the username, which is keyed onto this slightly long-winded thing, that URI looking like that. So what I'm going to do is copy that, because I'm going to need that in a moment to make use of this. And if we go back in here, let's go to our authentication service, and we'll put in another property that we'll have as a get, and we'll call it username, and it's going to return a string obviously. And then the first thing we need to do is we need to split that token into those 3 parts. So remember, it's just 3 sections separated by dots. So the easy thing to do is we can say const, and then let's say payload, which was the name of the middle section, equals, and then we say this dot JWT, we already had that to fetch the JWT out of session storage, dot split, and then we can just split it on a dot, and then we know it's got 3 sections and we want the middle one, so let's just put 1 in there, and that will give us our payload, so that'll give us the middle section. We then need to convert that from base64, and that will give us just a JSON string, so we'll call this as JSON, and then a really simple function available in JavaScript TypeScript, A to B, converts it from base64 into text, and so we can just say that on the payload. Then we want to convert the JSON into an actual JavaScript object, so we can say as obj equals, and then just do a JSON.parse of the as JSON. And then finally, we want to take from that object the item with the key that we just copied. So if we just say as obj and then paste into there that key for the name claim, and then that should give us that back. And so now we can make use of that. So in our component, let's make this a bit more complicated. So let's begin with a span, and on this we're going to have an ngIf, and that's going to be if we're logged in. So remember, we've already injected the authentication service, and the authentication service has a property called isLoggedIn, so we can put that in there. And if we're logged in, we're going to say welcome, and then again we'll bind onto the authentication service, and here we can get the username that we just wrote the code to get hold of. So that will give us a welcome message, and then if we're logged in, that's when we want there to be a log out. So we'll also put the log out button inside that span, so that should get that all working. But then we also, if we're not logged in, we need to have the navigation to take us to the login page. Now the code to navigate to the login we already saw. If we just go to the app component and just do a few Control-Zs, that was the code that we had in there. So let's copy that and then revert that to where we were. And then we can put that in here, but we've just got to give that the ngIf with the inverted logic. So I'll put a not on the front of that. And so now if we save everything and we go back here, so we can see at the moment we've got the login. So we click on the login, we can do the correct username, PA$W0RD. We log in there and we can see it's now saying welcome. It's extracted the Jasper Kent from the JWT. It's put up the logout button. We can log out again, or we can travel around. We're not logged in, so that's all working correctly. There's obviously a few other things you could do. When you did the logout, you might want to navigate back to the login page. A few ways you might want to change things, but that's the basics of a reasonable, friendly login mechanism, and very importantly, the logout. And as we saw, one of the principles with JWT, when you log out, you don't inform the server that you've logged out in any way. You just throw away the JWT and you can't therefore send it back, and you have to get a new one. So that's really it for what I was going to show you in terms of an Angular front end of this. There are a few other things, as I say, we can do, but I think that's covered the basics. But next time, we're going to look at the same sort of work, but in a different front end technology using Blazor, so we can see how we can do the whole of this purely in C#. So if you like the video, do click like, and if you want to see that next video, do subscribe to get notified when it comes out.